All right, hello, I'm Alex Goldberg, here to bring you my thoughts on Chelsea's transfer window as we approach the final few hours of it. I'll be looking at the positives, the negatives, and analyzing the deals that we still might see get over the line in the next few hours involving Chelsea. Starting, though, of course, with the Nicholas Jackson saga, and you can really call it a saga. So if he signs for Bayern Munich, which right now it is looking like he will do so very soon, still figuring out if that's going to be loan with option, loan with obligation, or permanent. Nonetheless, though, are we doing the right thing by letting Nicholas Jackson go? And it's a really tough one because now that Liam Delap has suffered an injury as of Saturday's game, all of a sudden you realize how thin Chelsea are at the striker position. It felt like Chelsea were not thin at the striker position all throughout the Club World Cup. All of a sudden, Delap's there to start the tournament with the club. João Pedro joins in the middle of the tournament and does so unbelievably well. And it feels like Jackson has gone from first string to third string and that he's almost a surplus to requirements, so to speak. And with someone who for the last two seasons has been basically Chelsea's starting striker, it feels silly to have him as a third string striker. Not to say that he couldn't have got that first string striker job back, but it didn't even feel like Chelsea wanted him to get that job back, because when you bring in Liam Delap, who of course had a good season at Ipswich and is a striker on the rise and has a history with Enzo Maresca at Manchester City and Joe Shields and Cole Palmer, it feels like Chelsea want Liam Delap to be one of the top two guys. And when you bring a João Pedro in, who also is from Chelsea's favorite club, let's be real, Brighton, and does so well in terms of just scoring goals in the Club World Cup, nonetheless, he also can assist and he can just basically play a handful of positions, but can really be a true striker. It felt like between Delap and João Pedro, one of those guys, at the very least, is whom Chelsea want to be the starting striker. And ideally, they just want to have a nice, healthy battle between the two. And then Nicholas Jackson, who has had some good moments with the club the last couple seasons, has become a bit of a volatile character at Chelsea. Not to say he's toxic in the dressing room, but two red cards that have been really potentially detrimental to Chelsea and how they've wanted to do. And seems like a small bit of a headache for Enzo Maresca and Chelsea to deal with when things are not going well. So it felt like, okay, the right move is to let go of Nicholas Jackson. And with strikers being so expensive on the market these days, unproven strikers, way more unproven than Nicholas Jackson, with them commanding such high fees, it felt like the right decision to, well, sometimes it's better to get rid of a player a year too early rather than a year too late. So Chelsea should get rid of Nicholas Jackson. And then the Bayern Munich loan, it's coming about, and ideally it should be a loan with obligation, right? As a Chelsea fan, you want it to be a loan with obligation, or you want it to be permanent. But the loan terms weren't bad because it was a very hefty loan fee that was reported on Friday evening going into Saturday morning. Very hefty. And of course, if the option to buy was activated next summer, that would also be a very hefty fee. So not the worst loan with option to buy deal you could have, actually fairly good. But then Delap goes down with an injury. And all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, we are thin at the striker position. We are thin. Tyreek George goes into the game up at striker, who's not a striker at all. And especially at the time, we'll talk about it during this segment, but Tyreek George was almost on his way out in that moment and still comes in at striker, and he's not a striker. And João Pedro stays in the 10. But you think to yourself, okay, well, the next game or future games, it's going to have to be João Pedro up at striker. But if João Pedro gets injured, well, now what? Because Mark Guiu has gone on loan to Sunderland. Now, of course, in this moment, Mark Guiu has been recalled from Sunderland, but still not really a proven striker that can count as somebody that is a guy you can rely upon in Premier League games to start from the off. So now, is it the right move to get rid of Nicholas Jackson? It does seem like in this moment, Nicholas Jackson is going to Bayern Munich. And I think the really hairy part of all of this is it clearly got tense and maybe a little hostile between Jackson and the club, which is a shame because not too long ago, Jackson loved the club loved Jackson. But it did seem like once Delap and João Pedro really got on, and once Chelsea started receiving calls for Jackson, and let's be real, started also making calls, in terms of Nicholas Jackson's availability. It did seem like maybe some bridges started to get burned and there was no turning back. And of course, when Delap got injured and Chelsea said, well, come on back, Nico, we're going to need you. And he said no. That's when it felt like there definitely was a point of no return. Because do you really want a player coming back who no longer wants to be at the club? It's a really good dressing room and a really happy dressing room. So is that even a fair situation to put upon Enzo Maresca? I would probably say no. But in this moment, as a Chelsea fan, we still have a handful of hours to go between now and the end of the deadline. And this is something that could change. But it's very well looking like Nicholas Jackson is going to go to Bayern Munich. And Chelsea are going to have fit strikers of João Pedro and Marc Guiu. So barring a late move for someone that can come in and truly get some minutes and hopefully is actually more on the experience side, Chelsea have went from feeling really good about the striker situation with Liam Delap and João Pedro to potentially not having Liam Delap for 2+ months and just having João Pedro and, of course, Marc Guiu. And with Cole Palmer currently injured, it would be nice to have João Pedro in the 10 position, but now he's going to need to move up front. So all of a sudden, and this is classic football because things change quickly in this sport, all of a sudden Chelsea feel very thin up top, which is not the greatest. So on Jackson, I do believe we're probably doing the right thing in letting him go, but I don't believe we have properly prepared for him going. That's probably the best way I can say it. Now, let's move on to another position at the complete opposite end of the pitch that I'm also a bit torn on if we've done the right thing here. Will Chelsea regret not bringing in a first-choice goalkeeper this window? Listen, heading into the window, I wasn't even thinking all that much about goalkeeper. Not to say goalkeeper wasn't one of my biggest problems. It absolutely was. Robert Sanchez is a keeper that I understand on his day can make some unbelievable saves and can have some great games, but he has shown me enough throughout past 2 seasons that I cannot fully trust him. He makes too many bonehead decisions, in my opinion. With that said, he had a wonderful Club World Cup, but like I said, going into the summer, I wasn't thinking we would do much the goalkeeper position because Chelsea own Mike Penders, a very talented young goalkeeper that they believe in a lot, and he's now on loan at Strasbourg. And it does seem like Chelsea are in a tight position where you can't really buy someone young at this point. You already bought Philip Jorgensen last summer, and it hasn't gone all that well. But you own so many goalkeepers, and if you buy someone young, it really creates an interesting and prickly situation with the development and pathway for Mike Penders. So if there was an older goalkeeper out there that was of the level of a Robert Sanchez and maybe a bit more steady in terms of less brain farts, as I like to call them, and also was somebody who was fairly comfortable playing with their feet, then I would say absolutely go for it. But going into the window, I think I was being realistic, and I was thinking that, well, those are really hard to find, right? An older keeper who has the talent of Robert Sanchez, but less brain farts and can play with their feet. And if that keeper exists, then probably other clubs want that keeper as well. Then the Mike Maignan situation happens at the very beginning of that first window, heading up to the Club World Cup, and it was an appealing situation to me. Chelsea, though, said that that's exactly what it was. It was a situation. It was an opportunity, more specifically, and that it wasn't really an actual full-on target of theirs, Mike Maignan. It was just more, could we get Mike Maignan for our price before the Club World Cup? They played hardball with Milan. Even though it doesn't look like he'll sign a new deal at Milan, Milan said, sorry, we need at least this amount of money. Chelsea said, more like 12, 13 mil, that's all we're going to offer. And, of course, it just didn't end up happening. And now it looks like Robert Sanchez will be the first-choice goalkeeper for this season. I can't fully say that Chelsea have done something wrong here by not addressing the first-choice goalkeeper position because, again, like I said, when you have a gem, I'm going to call him a gem, in Mike Penders, it is tough to then go buy yet another young goalkeeper and make that situation cloudy in terms of Penders' development and pathway. But I do really wish that Chelsea had gone out and gotten a Mike Maignan because at the end of the day, he is a level raiser. If you had told me 6 months ago, Alex, going into the next season, instead of Robert Sanchez, your goalkeeper is going to be Mike Maignan, Are you going to be closer to the Premier League title or further away or about the same? I would have said closer. And it wasn't a huge deal to do transfer-wise. It seems like his wages would have fit. They would have been big, but they would have fit within Chelsea's wage structure. So I would say do it. And seeing as he's in his late 20s and he's going to be on the other side of 30 very soon, I think it would have been the perfect age goalkeeper to bring in with Mike Mignon and the pipeline. So I don't know if Chelsea will ultimately regret not bringing in a first-choice goalkeeper, because I'm not also about to say that Mike Mignon would have elevated Chelsea to the title. And I'm then, again, not saying that keeping Robert Sanchez as the first-choice goalkeeper for this season will kick them out of top four. So I'm not sure too much will have changed versus bringing in Mike Mignon and then just having Robert Sanchez. Maybe it's the difference between a second-place finish and a fourth-place finish. Either way, you have Champions League football. So it's a little of column A and a little of column B there. But I will say, I will not go into any games this season, any games, no matter how good a form Robert Sanchez is in, comfortable with the goalkeeper situation. I will not. And I honestly don't believe Chelsea will either, despite what they say publicly about that position. All right, continuing on the theme of trust. I was just saying, can we trust our goalkeeper? Well, here, how about this? Can we trust our current center backs to mount a title challenge? Now, the whole title challenge thing, I think, gets a little dumbed down when you just consider how strong Liverpool are. And this is a deadline day segment. So, of course, Liverpool have also decided not just to win the summer transfer window, but to win deadline day specifically. In bringing in, of course, Isak, and maybe, as we're recording this as well, Mark Guehi. So I do believe this title is Liverpool's to lose and then some. But still, Chelsea are off to a good start, 7 points. And it does feel like this team is ready to compete and is ready to start truly challenging for titles. And I think the Club World Cup, albeit a very, very different tournament, was a preview of how good this team can be, even against some top teams like they were against Paris Saint-Germain. So Levi Colwill's injury was gutting. Absolutely gutting. There's no two ways about it. Tosin and Trevoh Chalobah are solid center backs. They're solid, and I think they're actually very underrated. I think they're underrated within the Premier League and even within the Chelsea fan base. But can you win a Premier League title with Tosin and Trevoh Chalobah as your center backs? I'd probably say no. I would probably say no, especially when you have Robert Sanchez behind them. If you had Petr Cech and then you had Tosin and Trev, maybe. If you also have the best midfield in the league, like I believe Chelsea have, and Cole Palmer, and two phenomenal fullbacks, and João Pedro, who it looks like could explode this season. But I think when you have the battery of Tosin and Trev, and then, of course, Robert Sanchez behind them, I don't believe that's title challenge caliber. Now, a wild card here, though, is Wesley Fofana. He, of course, is never fit, and that breaks me up because I'm a massive Wesley Fofana fan and believer. I think he is one of the more talented center backs in the league, but sometimes availability is the best ability, and he has shown very little ability in that regard. So he is a wild card, though, because if he is fit for most of this season, then I think it really lightens the pressure on one player specifically between Tosin and Trev. Ideally, it would be Tosin that is available more often than not, because Tosin is the only other center back that Enzo Maresca trusts in the center back position, besides, of course, the aforementioned and now injured Levi Colwill. He does not really trust Wesley Fofana as a center back. So Chelsea defensively play a back four, but of course in possession play a back three. So it would need to be Wesley Fofana more as a right center back in possession and Tosin as the center back. Apparently, Maresca is not as trusting in Trevoh Chalobah in that position. But ideally, both are fit, and then you also have Wesley Fofana fit. And then I believe, who knows, if Chelsea's midfield and attack can be as good as I believe their potential is, and Liverpool can maybe hit a hiccup where their new players just aren't gelling quick enough. Never say never. If Leicester City could win a title, then I think Chelsea could definitely win a title this season. But it's a big if, and it will hinge on the fitness of someone like Wesley Fofana, a true wild card. And I could also say Josh Chempong, who is a wonderful young player, but I don't really want to heap any pressure onto him as he is just 19. So I understand why Chelsea have not gone out and bought a center back, especially for big money, ever since Levi Colwill got injured. It's very similar to the goalkeeper situation, where you like what you have at home, you don't love it. But you also, in this case with center backs, have a lot of young ones, Mamadou Sarr at Strasbourg, Anselmino, who just had a good debut at Borussia Dortmund, and you don't really feel fully comfortable, just like goalkeeper, going to buy yet another young one because of the developmental pathway for the guys you already own. Had there been an older one, just like goalkeeper, that was ready to come in, play center back, had experience, and was not too expensive, I would have been all about that, and I hope Chelsea would have been all about that. But aside from a Mark Guéhi, who only had his sights on Liverpool, I can't really think of one. So, again, not overly trusting of the center back position, like I'm not with goalkeeper. With that said, I'm a bit more trusting because I am a big backer and believer in Trevoh Chalobah. I think he's probably one of the more underrated center backs in the league, to be perfectly honest. And I really do think Tosin has been a wonderful free transfer from last summer. All right, speaking of transfers and signings, let's talk about maybe a new signing I've been most impressed by. And I would imagine your answer would be exactly the same. João Pedro. I don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. I really don't. But I was there at all the Club World Cup games. We've seen this season start for Chelsea. I've been to the last 2 Premier League games for Chelsea, away to West Ham, and of course, Saturday. And man, João Pedro looks like he is a star in the making. A star. He has all the talent, and he always has. Since the Watford days as an 18-year-old left winger, he showed so much talent. At Brighton, I thought he was basically the embodiment of Brighton. I like to call Brighton a bit of a bipolar club, where one game they could be absolutely unbelievable, and the next game they're dross, they're awful. And I wouldn't say that João Pedro was awful some games, but he was very inconsistent. And funnily enough, he usually performed against the big clubs for Brighton. He really stepped up when he was challenged, and he showed his talent. And by all accounts, if you ever hear his teammates, his past teammates, speak about his talent, they're in awe of it. He's got that Brazilian flair and just that outrageous Brazilian ability and talent. And the second he comes to the Club World Cup, he's thrown into the fire, and he produces just unbelievable goals in unbelievably big and pressurized moments. And then you start to wonder, is he one of these guys that will get better when he goes to a big club? Because he's always going to be challenged. At Brighton, he knew he was one of the best players, maybe the most talented player at his club. So is that always going to then help him be a 10 out of 10? Does he need to go to a Chelsea where all of a sudden he's got Cole Palmer and loads of talented players around him, where he's no longer the guy, where he feels that challenge and he wants to rise to it? He wants to rise to the occasion. I think so. I think this is one of those guys that is now waiting to break out. And I think he is actually breaking out right before our eyes. He's a much better chance creator than I think I ever gave him credit for when he was at Brighton. And despite him never scoring heaps and heaps of goals at Brighton and needing penalties to even get to his tallies, which were still fairly modest, you can see his ball striking and his comfort and his confidence in the box is tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. And he can head the ball too, scoring a header this past Saturday against Fulham. So I really do believe that as much stick as us Chelsea fans give the sporting directors from time to time about buying from Brighton or buying from the City Academy, we have done largely good buying from Brighton, Caicedo, Cucurella, and João Pedro. Oh boy, this could be a special one. This could really be a special one. Premier League experience already, just 23 years old, probably extra motivated to hold down now a spot in the senior Brazilian national team. And let's not also overlook the fact that I think he's quite happy to put an arm around the young 18-year-old Brazilian Estevão and show him this is how it's done. This is how it's done in the Prem. So, yeah, I would say if I'm going to single out a signing so far that Chelsea have made this summer, because I'm not going to count Estevao, considering we've known for a while he was coming to Chelsea, and it's just now that he's allowed to play for Chelsea. I'm definitely going to single out João Pedro. Minimum star in the making. Don't even rule out superstar. All right, so let's now go to an outgoing perspective. Who am I most sad to see leave the club this window? I got to be honest. Maybe one of the highlights of the window for Chelsea, and maybe this is a bit of a backhanded compliment, because I will admit this Chelsea transfer window might be ending in an underwhelming fashion. Losing a Nicholas Jackson and then not replacing him with anyone, not getting a Xavi Simons, not getting a Fermin Lopez. I would say that something I can hang my hat on is no real exit that I'm gutted about. Truly, no real exit that I'm gutted about. Andre Santos was a player I was really worried that Chelsea might get tempted to sell. They did not. I think he's a wonderful young midfielder, worthy of starting for most Premier League clubs, including Chelsea. And I was also a little bit nervous that Trevoh Chalobah would be sold. But ever since Levi Colwill has gotten injured, and I don't like that it takes an injury to necessarily make a club value their current player more, but yes, ever since Colwill's injury, Trevoh Chalobah was never going to go anywhere. And you could probably say the same for Andre Santos with the fact that Romeo Lavia just cannot stay fit. So no real detrimental outgoing happened in my opinion. So I'm going to basically group Nicholas Jackson and Christopher Nkunku in together here. Now, Nicholas Jackson by far had the bigger moments for Chelsea. So I'm a bit sad to see him go because this time last season, I thought Nicholas Jackson was about to become one of the absolute best strikers in the league and maybe even in Europe. And it took a really, really big turn, almost a true 180. So I am a bit sad about that. And I do feel like he'll go to Bayern Munich and he'll compete with Luis Diaz on the left, and he'll back up Harry Kane, and he could probably look quite good in the Bundesliga. I think he's actually a Bundesliga player. He loves the open space, and he showed that when he was allowed to play on bigger pitches when he was in a Chelsea shirt. So a bit sad on the Nicholas Jackson front, but I'll couple that with Christopher Nkunku, who did not have many great moments for Chelsea. But I will kind of rewind back to when we acquired Christopher Nkunku, and it originally was for Thomas Tuchel. And I had such high hopes for this boy. Such high hopes. And it just didn't work for so many reasons. I mean, he was acquired for Tuchel, and then we know Tuchel's gone, and Graham Potter comes in, and we go through Pochettino after that, and obviously now on Maresca. So he wasn't just acquired for the previous manager, he was acquired for many managers ago. But then, of course, the injuries. One injury, and then another, and it was just extremely hard for him to ever get any momentum at this club. And by the time he was kind of fit and available, I don't want to say durable because I wouldn't go that far, but basically the start of last season when he was ready to truly play, he just didn't fit Maresca's formation. He is one of those players that is a 9.5, and I know some old-fashioned fans will roll their eyes at that term. It's too modern for them, but he doesn't really have a great position in Maresca's system. He's not a pure striker. He's not a proper 10. He's not a left winger, and he's not a right winger. So I would say that it's a shame it didn't work out for Nkunku, and I do think he could kick on at AC Milan, just like I think Nicholas Jackson could. But I don't believe there'll be big losses for Chelsea this season, as I feel like, aside from Chelsea being a little thin at the striker position, I don't think it would have worked out all that well had they stayed. And finally, by the way, as reported by talkSPORT's Ben Jacobs, who I absolutely love in the last few minutes, Facundo Buonanotte has completed his loan move to Chelsea. No option to buy. A bit of a weird one. I cannot lie. If this is the alternative to getting a Xavi Simons or a Fermin Lopez, it is underwhelming. It is underwhelming. With that said, he is a talented boy. There's no doubt about it. 20-year-old who has some Prem experience, left-footed. He's kind of a backup, so to speak, to Cole Palmer. Likes to play in similar zones, right? Not a pure 10, but not a pure winger either. So I don't hate it. I definitely don't hate it. I think it's decent depth, but Chelsea are not here to develop players for Brighton, okay? If anything, it's the opposite. You're going to develop our players. We give you Levi Colwill, you develop him, and we'll take him back. Thank you very much. So as long as Chelsea feel like there is absolutely no obligation to play this boy, which I believe they won't feel that obligation, fine. It is what it is. In isolation, I actually have no problem with it because, especially with a no option to buy, which means he could truly just return back to Brighton after one season, well, it kind of keeps a pathway open for one of Chelsea's most talented youngsters, Kendry Paez, who's a very similar position. But again, if this was instead of a Xavi Simons, then I don't like it because Xavi Simons can be a game changer. Buonanotte, I don't believe will be that this season for Chelsea. So final depth, yeah, I'm okay with bringing in final depth because you don't want to end the window with no backup to, say, Cole Palmer. And after Cole Palmer has been struggling with a groin injury, okay, fair play, I'm good with depth, especially depth that basically is no strings attached that you can get rid of after a season. So I'm not against it. But yeah, I'm so indifferent about it is probably the best way I could say. And honestly, that's a proper segue to just wrapping this up because I had hope for this window. I really did. I liked the Delap move for £30 million. And I wasn't really on board with the João Pedro move at the time, but I did think fans were saying too much negatively about João Pedro. And maybe it's just because we have a little PTSD of just always buying from Brighton. With that said, the only bad buy we've had from Brighton, and you can't even call him a completely bad buy, is Robert Sanchez. But I know fans would like Chelsea to be a little bit more exploratory and go somewhere else other than Brighton and Manchester City's academy. But I did think João Pedro would be, a good player for us. Didn't foresee how good. So I think the window started off strong. Estevao coming in. And despite that being from previous windows when we actually did acquire him, brilliant. Keeping Andre Santos, brilliant. But I was hoping there was at least one of a center back to come in, not including Yorol Hato from Ajax, who I believe is more of a backup to Cucurella, which is a good move. Having a backup to Cucurella is important, absolutely important. But again, I was hoping there'd either be a center back or a first choice goalkeeper or one more attacker like a Xavi Simons who can take some pressure off of Cole Palmer, even when Cole Palmer's on the pitch, and just free up some attention away from Palmer and onto someone like Xavi, who's a true game changer, a triple threat, can shoot, can pass, can dribble. And it looks like Chelsea will be not getting a center back, especially after the Colwill injury. Will be going into this depending and relying upon players that right now are not title challenge players. Maybe some of them can turn out to be, but they're not. And a goalkeeper who I don't believe you can win the Premier League title with. So it's an underwhelming finish to the window, which once had promise. Do I believe that the way Chelsea are finishing this window is now going to lead to no top four finish? No, I don't. I do believe Chelsea will still finish in the top four. And let's just stretch that out to a Champions League spot because the fifth spot could very well still be for Champions League. So I don't believe that the end of the window is so detrimental for Chelsea that they are no longer in a Champions League position, which ultimately is the most important thing. But I do believe the end of this window is making it that much more unlikely that Chelsea can screw around and maybe win the Premier League title. And I do believe that because of the way this window is petering out for Chelsea, it'll now be a bit more of a nervy finish to the season rather than having a Champions League spot wrapped up with, say, 5 games to go. So no damning outgoings, a couple incomings that I think highly of, especially João Pedro, but could have done better and should have done better. When you acquire a Champions League spot on your own, the way Chelsea did at the very end of last season, and they should be proud of the way they finished at the end of last season, and then you perform like you did at the Club World Cup, and you win all that Club World Cup money too. Let's not forget about that. And then you don't make a move that's a real, we're a Champions League club move. Fans have every right to be frustrated. So still plenty good days ahead for Chelsea, but it's still going to be some bumpy waters. All right, those are my thoughts on Chelsea's transfer window. Never a dull day in the world of Chelsea, and I think we've learned that here on deadline day with the whole Nicholas Jackson drama. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it.